I'm calling the Plant Board Ethics Committee to order for its October 28th, 2021 meeting. Would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Kathy, you got a roll there to take?
Yes, I do. Member Lemaster,
Present.
Mr. Reader,
Present.
Mr. Brewer,
Present.
Ms. Carter,
Here.
Ms. Bush.
Here.
All right, we got 5 members.
Great. Sounds like we got
We have a quorum.
quorum present, and I guess if it's okay with Mr. Reader, guess we'll go the first item on our agenda. A little bit of background about, we were talking about sort of, I guess, our meeting today is we had a question about what exactly, how can our staff and how can our board best identify potential conflicts? Is there a bright line rule that's sort of easy to adopt, a rule of thumb that the committee could sort of promulgate that would some guidance that would help folks sort of identify situations to be wary of? So I had put together a kind of a little memo that sort of went through some AG opinions and so forth that tried to explain, the definition of a conflict, and then just some situations that I could think of that might be problematic, might be things to sort of be on the alert for, sort of some flags to watch out for that would prompt the board or a staff person to seek further guidance from this group here. And I had thought of one additional one since I put together our memo to the group that was is that staff person, is that board member, are they collaborating with any consultants, say, who work for the plant board? Are you doing work with a group that may be on contract working with the plant board? So came up with another little situation there, but my thought was to see what folks thought. I guess if anyone had any handy rules of thumb that might be could provide some advice, and then if there were any other sort of common situations that people might want to be on the alert for. So that's what I would provide to sort of kick it off, and then to sort of put that together sort of in our form to that the committee what information might the committee want to evaluate a potential conflict situation. So that was the information I provided to the group there, and with that, I'll turn it over to the group and Mr. Reader and see what everybody's thoughts are.
Before we get into trying to define a conflict, Hans, what I'd like to suggest is that you generally tell the group which employees and officers of the plant board are subject to the code of ethics. Not every one of them are. And what levels, I don't mean the names or anything, but what levels of people are subject to that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, our ethics policy that we adopted last fall about this time, it notes that the standards of section 3 under the standards of conduct section, it notes that every board member and FPB employee shall comply with the following standards of conduct. That language, because we are a special purpose governmental entity, we're a bit different than the executive branch offices. We're under the chapter 65 sections. So our language as a SPGE has to parallel the language of our founding agency, which is the city. So that's where this language comes from.
So everybody that works here.
Yes, sir.
Subject to this, and whatever forms have to be made out or disclosure, we ever adopt, that everybody be turning one in.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
The standards of conduct are applicable, and then we've got other forms down here that note where your financial disclosure filing requirements are in section 4, and that defines the classes of officers, employees that file your financial interests. And sort of like what we were talking about earlier, that sort of encompasses those who are, officers, chief engineers, superintendents, department directors. So the filing requirements, everybody has to comply with the ethics code. The filing requirements are a bit narrower as far as those employees that would probably be handling contracts and making recommendations to the board. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir. And I guess one other item that Mr. Reeder mentioned is a good idea, that was that maybe we want to come up, we can talk with the procurement department and folks and see what list of vendors that we have to provide to staff and the board. And that way you have sort of a list of folks that you can look at and say, oh, well, yes, our auditors, for example, our auditing firm happens to handle doing my taxes for me.
I need a stamp.
Pardon me?
Make sure I got everything up there.
I heard somebody.
You might have heard me, but thought I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. No problem. Perfectly all right.
What seems to me on this, as far as there are several parts to this organization: electric, water, cable. And a lot of it I don't know. I just paid my bill there a while ago, and so the things that I pay for on this thing, there's a different group of people running each one of them, and a person that works for the water department doesn't necessarily know who they deal with in electrical department or cable or whatever. But so I said, my thought was that if it doesn't violate any internal procedures here, that everybody subject to this code, at least in the decision-making area, should be provided a list of vendors, contractors, people that provide other services like auditing, legal services, accounting, whatever. There ought to be a master list of that everybody deals with, because you can get into a conflict situation and not even know you're in one. And and it's in a conflict. Sometimes conflicts there's different kinds of them, and some of them are kind of innocuous and that don't really amount to a lot. But in a public agency, the perception of it is really where the damage falls for the most part. And if you read this list of or read some of these legal opinions and so forth that Hans has put forth in this memorandum, you'll find that one thing that really creates an actual conflict is the receipt of remuneration or some kind of monetary thing. You start dealing with somebody you shouldn't be dealing with. But if that does not happen, you still got the perception to deal with. And all these public agencies, if it's General Motors you're talking about, they may have all kind of conflicts, but the public really doesn't care as long as they get a good car out of it, And but with regard to anybody you pay taxes or fees to, anything that looks like a conflict, it's just as bad as the real thing. So there's several things to look at, but I thought that list of people that do business with them, that would be pretty key. And you got two levels of employees here too. You've got those you're about to hire and they're not employees yet, and you can deal with them a lot easier. You just don't have to hire them if they got much of a conflict. But the people that are already here, you know, you've got to deal with what you got here, and you certainly don't want to, you know, be accused of somebody of conflict, having it come in front of us or wind up in the general manager's office if it don't have to be. And if a list like that might provide a way that people can present the question internally to the front office. Say,
Great idea.
I own this, or I do business with this accounting firm, and or I'm a partner in it, or I own stock in it. Don't have to be dealing with it yourself. You could own stock in something like that. But if they had a list of that, that would be a good starting point, I think. Try to keep these things out of here.
It's a good point.
Yeah, if employees and are unaware of who you're doing business with, how can they, or why should they be held accountable? You know, but they need to be aware of that. I agree. It kind of comes into, or I look at conflicts if you're looking at outside employment or outside ownership. You can be an employee for a company that does business with the plant board, or you can be, like Stephen said, an owner, you know, I would say a 5% or more owner in that company. So you've got two situations there. One thing that you could look at, it might be too cumbersome, but if you wanted to have, if someone wanted to have outside employment with a business that does business with the plant board, you could set up a system where they could get approval from that by the appointing authority or by the ethics committee, by someone, as long as they weren't involved in any decisions concerning that outside employer for which they wish to work. There really would not be an actual conflict there. You could do it on a case-by-case basis for an employee. Now, if you're an owner, it's a totally different situation. I think you have an inherent conflict then. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, ma'am.
Sure does.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This is Jack. I want to follow up with what Jill said. Brings up a question of practicality. Yeah, I understand if you're in a board meeting and an issue comes up that would produce, you've already signed the conflict of interest statement, filed it, something comes up at that moment that is a conflict of interest. How do you announce it to the board? Then on another situation, if it's an employee or a staff person who's dealing with the situation and you realize that's a conflict, to whom do you announce it? How does that practically, how does that work?
That's a good question as far as the mechanics would go. That's sort of the second part of our, you know, I think if somebody recognized I had a conflict, the cases say, you know, public disclosure. So you would make a, you know, some of these opinions talk about, well, I'm gonna, you know, discuss it at a board meeting. Say, well, I work for this potential contractor, or I've had dealings with them, so I'm going to absent myself from the board meeting. And then you get into a little bit of question about, well, if you just sit out from the vote, you're counted as going along with the majority typically. So that person would probably want to just be completely, I guess, off the premises, for lack of a better term, when they're considering it sort of like in one of those the second AG opinion. I think I found there, it suggested that, you know, if your interest is going to be two city commissioners are voting in favor of their industry, if you've still got a quorum left of your board, then those people should just not participate in that meeting, and that way there's no question of it. But I think the key to it is the public disclosure of it, and then consulting with, if there's, like Ms. Lemaster just noted, if there's a request that, I'm not involved with this consulting company, but I'd like to do a little work for them, then you have some type of a form there's some documentation that we have put together. But I think whether it's we've got a form, or whether it's in the minutes, or the company minutes of a public meeting somehow, you want some type of public disclosure of that, and then the resolution of it, whether it's the ethics committee opined that it was all right in this instance on a case by case basis, or that member noted that I'm just going to completely absent myself from this process with this particular business, particular situation.
And this is Jill again. When someone's employed, do they receive a copy, I guess, of the code of ethics for the plant board? I assume they receive something like that. One thing you could go ahead.
That's okay. I was going to say, I was cutting out a little bit. I'm sorry. The orientation process is when they get their documents and that kind of thing.
Okay. You might think of doing, I know you said you want to do a checklist. You might think of doing, of course, all my background is with the Executive Branch Ethics Commission. So I'm just basing that on a lot of things that we did, but you might think of doing some sort of like a little pamphlet like this that would have ethical guidelines, and it would list, and then you could have, like, I've got examples in here. You could have your little checklist or your examples in there of things, and here it gives doing business with regulated by all the your list of things there. You can give them examples, something that might be a little bit easier for them to understand and to read than a copy of the big code of ethics. You know what I'm saying?
Sort of a Cliff's Notes version of
yeah that. Yeah, and then you could say, do you have any outside employment? Or it wouldn't have to be a question. If you have outside employment, you need to contact you or whomever and get approval for that outside employment. If it's with one of these companies, you could list the companies at that point in time. I guess you'd have to update it every so often, but you could list even the companies that plant board is doing business with. I don't think the plant board regulates anybody per se, really. That's one of the things, you look at, does the plant board regulate anybody? But it's probably just doing business with would be your potential conflict, more so than regulating outside entities. And you could list those two there. So that's just a suggestion, and you could come up with something and we could review it or something like that if you wanted to, which is what you've done kind of already with all these things, but
sort of
an idea.
Yes, ma'am. Something to hand out at orientation.
Right.
For your employees. That's a great idea.
Something that would direct them, you would have in there. When I was looking through the code of ethics, the main things when you were specifically talking about, contracting with your own agency or outside employment with an entity that does business with your agency, it looks like it's really covered by Section 3B or Section 3M. Those are probably the only other thing in Section M. You might want to have the word agreement in there. It says may hold a contract, but a lot of times, you might want to put the word agreement in there also instead of just contract.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just a suggestion.
And they say that's in Section M.
Yes.
Section M as well.
It says no Frankfurt Electric and Water Plant Board employee or board member shall directly through others undertake, execute, whole or enjoy in whole or in part any contract made, entered into. You might say any contract or agreement made.
Yes,
I just think make it a little bit broader.
Page 4 there, sure.
Yeah.
Good points. Very good points.
And I'm assuming that means 5%. If I don't have KRS 61 in front of me, but I'm assuming that means through a business in which the employee or member would own or control an interest of 5%. Or greater, or more than 5%, I think is what it says.
And this synopsis Jill's talking about not just new employees, give it to everybody, because
Initially, yeah, you'd give it to everybody initially. And then as new employees came on board, yeah.
And provide some type of updates to people perhaps too, you know, as, you know, when you, you know, some type of a recurrent training, perhaps something along those lines for.
Yeah, maybe annually or something.
And yes, ma'am, you're right. It is 5%. Mr. Cubine pointed out, he suggested to look at the KRS 6.761. And that's where that 5%, that was on the list of bullet points there. That was, so that you're right, it's a 5% interest on that KRS.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
in fact, Jill, the form, the form we had to fill out as employees, I remember filling a bunch of them out years ago, every year. It had this specific language in it. And it's 5%, as I remember.
That's
Right.
In fact, that was a pretty good form you had, you know.
Yeah. And the one that they fill out is very similar to it. The one that the plant board members fill out, and some of the employees. But even though they don't fill that out, all the employees are subject to it. I assume that means part-time employees also, summer employees, interim employees.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I hadn't, you like say you would catch that would everybody is, you know, grass, but you're,
It should.
when you're they just made me think of you know, common situations that somebody might not be aware of, the folks that do the grass out here sometimes.
Yeah.
If you don't know that somebody, you might say, well, they're doing my yard too. You know, it might be a situation. So so that's a good point. That's in your list. Yeah. But no, those are all great ideas. Thank you all very much. Those
But I really think if someone, you know, is employed by someone who does business with the plant board, but they're not involved in any decisions concerning that outside employer, there's not an actual conflict. And that's why I think it would be good to allow some leverage for approval of those types of outside employment, which is different than if you own a company. But if you're just an employee and you're not making any decisions, I think it would be all right.
yes, ma'am. A little more flexibility in that situation.
Yeah.
Well,
And looking at the questionnaire, it looks to me general enough to cover the area for self-reporting. But if a person has a complaint that he feels is a conflict of interest with someone else's job doing with that contract or agreement, according to what we were saying about an ethics question, they would fill out something that is authorized, notarized, and signed and given to one of us or given to some staff person. Is that the way that works, rather than how do you do not other people reporting complaints?
yes, sir. That's correct. This is more geared. This form, the situation where someone has a complaint and says, well, I do think there's an impropriety, that's got to be made. It's a signed, sworn statement, and then it would be provided depending on who it is. If they say, well, it's perhaps it's the attorney that has the conflict, or it's the general manager, you would provide alternate avenues to report that. You wouldn't want to have the person say, well, I'm going to file my complaint with the general manager, but it's the general manager who has the conflict. You want to provide some alternative avenues for reporting is one of the things I've seen. This form today that we had is more geared for someone that is seeking an opinion from the ethics committee about what Ms. Lemaster pointed out. A good example, excellent example there is, hey, I just I just cut grass for the company that happens to cut grass for the plant board, and I'm just weed eating and cutting grass, and I'm not involved in anything else, and I'd like to continue working to make a little little extra gas money or whatnot. And that's sort of what the I guess what information would the committee like to have in front of it to evaluate that situation? And that was sort of what I was shooting for with this form today. So, and if anybody has any ideas about what you want to add to there, please let me know and I'll get it in there. So I appreciate it.
I think there needs to be a statement somewhere affirming that in his employment, in his plant board employment, that he's not involved in decisions concerning the outside employer for whom he wishes to work or for which he wishes to work.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And again, that's an employee-employer relationship rather than ownership. I think it's totally different if somebody owns a company that does business with the plant board. Then it's hard to remove yourself, I think, at all. Even if you're not involved in decisions concerning that your own company, it still would be a conflict, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a minor point, but I like the questionnaire. I just wonder if we could have a place at the bottom where a person would actually sign their name rather than just it being listed at the top. Sort
Yes,
of
sir.
makes it a
Good
little
point.
bit more commitment on the person's part that they're actually putting their name down, their signature, their date.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
And date. Mm-hmm. Good.
You could have a statement in there about something, it's true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief, something along, and then have a signature block, something set up like that. So that's a good
Good idea.
that's a good idea.
Very good idea.
Yeah, you know how to put that, Bryce. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I will add those in there. Is does anyone have any, I guess, Mr. Reader, see what your thoughts are about anything, any other items that I think myself, I don't want to, I think as many examples as we can come up with, like on, red flags to watch for. I know you all have lots and lots of experience with, and whether it's the executive branch or, I think it translates very well to, like, as you were pointing out, any type of public employment that you might have. So if anybody can think of examples that we might want to list in our, like what Ms. Lemaster, our pamphlet or our memo here to provide to people, saying, hey, these are things you want to be on the lookout for. We might want to add to that, and don't have to think of them now, but if you can shoot me an email or something like that later on, and I can add those on as we progress. So I think that's a good idea about a pamphlet, a checklist to give the people at the outset of things.
They need to know also, we may have it covered here somewhere, but those very people need to know where they can take their concerns to. Take it to the boss and bring it up here. What do they do with it?
Yes, sir. Who do you approach? Supervisor, general manager, so on.
Exactly.
Do you mean your concerns about your doing business with plant board or your outside employment, or do you mean concerns against somebody else?
Well, outside employment's one thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So probably that would need, or yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's something that we can talk about in orientation and things like with the HR side of stuff. When people come in, is you can always talk to your supervisor and HR and so forth to get advice about how to proceed on a particular question.
It's better if we could get it down to a point where it took a little time to do it, but over a period of time, you know, where they could start presenting these questions before they take the employment.
That's good.
Right.
We do in our initial interviews now, there's a lot of we have a lot of questions on the nepotism side of things. There are a lot of, so we could add in a few preliminary questions about, you know, who do you work for now and so forth. And then too, in the HR side of things, when somebody has a resume, they've got their, or maybe not on the resume, but at least in the application that we have, you have some previous, you know, you have previous employment. So if HR was looking at an application that says I'm an engineer with Vast Solutions or Census, who's our smart meter, you know, our big smart meter project that's going on right now. If somebody says I'm an engineer with Census, and HR saw that, you know, it's having HR being aware of, you know, who all's the plant board doing business with and so forth. So that's a good point. You could stop that conflict and say, well, make sure this person's not, you know, or know to question about it at the interview. So head it off before you get there. So that's a very good point.
And in your list where you talk about, you know, are you working, and I think you've done that already. Never mind. You've got the 5% or 10,000 or more in there. Yeah, you do.
Yes, ma'am. That was your 6761. I could
Right.
say that real fast.
I see it. 6761, right.
Hans, I have a question. This is Maria.
Yes, ma'am. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good. Doing good. Thank you.
I have a question on item number 6 in your list. It says, are you family friend using plant board property or personnel for anything other than plant board business? What were you trying to get at there?
Anything that you might be, if you had if you were using any kind of you know, let's say I wanted to have a sideline law practice, for example, and I wanted to use the plant board computers or the plant board research tools that to support, you know, doing other, you know, other work other than for the plant board. That sort of thing comes to mind. The you know, you're using company property, you know, public property for anything besides public business.
Another thing I wanted to point. Go ahead.
What about, sorry, Jill, what about one last piece to that? What about if you're using plant board property? Well, it would be the employee using the plant board property for something else.
Yes, ma'am.
Other than plant board business. But I, as an outsider, not a plant board property employee, I could come to the plant board and ask to use plant board property for something else that I wanted to. I mean, for example, there's lots of property that is used for educational purposes.
I'm trying to follow, like, if somebody wanted to, if somebody came and said, I want you to use the plant board track hoe or the plant board bucket truck to trim my trees with, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But that would be the same sort of thing. I'm not using it in furtherance of the plant board's operations, but maybe not my operations or my property, but, you know, my neighbor's trees or whatnot over here. That might be that would not be the same thing. You're using it for something other than the plant board's plant board's purposes.
So would they have to then come submit one of the forms to ask permission?
If they ask, I would say that would be pretty clearly. I would not want to, wouldn't want to be using company property that you couldn't use for company business. I wouldn't authorize I wouldn't think our operations, no, you can't take the bucket truck home to trim your trees with, or something along those lines. I mean, they could ask, but I wouldn't think that would be a legitimate use of company funds, company property.
Hans, I have one more point to make. On our list of questions where you have, for example, you have, here are some situations, not exhaustive, when you should consider asking. First of all, you might want to not make those in question format. You might want to make them in non-question format. But where it says, are you family, friend? I don't think you can include friend. I think that's too broad. I don't think the law prohibits a friend of mine from doing that. If I'm an employee of the plant board and I have a friend who's contracting with the plant board, I don't think that can be prohibited. I don't think that's a conflict. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's too broad down there with friend. And then the other thing we need to know, I look back in the definitions, and we've got family member, and we have defined, and we have where is it? Immediate family. So we need to decide, based on our law, based on our standards here, should that be immediate family or should it be family? How broad should that be? And you can look at 6, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
And see what it says. So those are a couple things you might want to check.
Yes, ma'am. My thought with friend, I agree with you completely that it's pretty broad, but and the reason that I had put, are you family, friend, the friend, I would, as Mr. Reeder was pointing out, just to try to think about the perception of a conflict. The committee, if somebody, filled out a form and came to the committee, that'd certainly be that sure, it's a legal, it might be legal that your friend is a vendor for the plant board. It's perfectly legal if they're submitting, and they may very well submit the best bid. They may be the very best service provider that there is, but nonetheless, it's your best friend, and everybody knows that that you've been good buddies for years, and somehow they're always the ones that are getting all the plant board contracts for whatever it may be. So I definitely agree with your point about, is there a legal basis to do something? And
you could put something in there like, or by any other person for the members or employees' use or benefit. That way, if they're going to benefit from it in some way because they're friends, then that would cover that.
What was your phraseology?
That's some language we have. What?
What you were kind of cutting out a tad bit there. It was.
Oh, I'm sorry. You could say, or by any other person for the members or employees' use or benefit, and that would kind of cover it if they were benefiting from their friend's contract or from their friend's agreement. But yet it doesn't make it sound like it's all friends. But I see this is just a checklist. You're just, and maybe you could, I don't know.
By you or any other person for the member's use or benefit.
Yeah, or the employee, member or employee, because it could be a board member, it could be employee.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good point.
That's just a way to kind of cover your basis, because you may not have a contract with, but you may be benefiting from a contract that someone has. You may be a subcontractor with them, or something. So that kind of covers that.
Very good, thank you. You or any other person for the members, or employees
Well,
use or benefit.
or by any other person for the member or employee's use or benefit,
Yes, ma'am.
like your spouse or a friend. You could put in parentheses spouse, friend, family.
Very good. Very good.
It's all part of that same sentence about not enjoying a part of a contract or an agreement. That it's all part of that sentence. And under M,
Let's just try to get that's very helpful because it gets a little more, it broadens it a little more than, like you said, than just friend, because you want to make sure that it's anybody that you could, the perception of it, that somebody is getting a benefit off of the relationship that
right.
with the plant board. So very good, very good.
Read that back again.
Or want me to read it back? Mr. Reader, I don't know if my mic picked it up. Mr. Reader asked that I read it back again. Are you, your family, or any other person, then we could put parentheses there, a spouse, friend, family, for the members or employees' use or benefit?
I don't think that's where it goes. I think it goes in M, and then on page 4, I think that's where you want to put it.
Oh, you're talking about putting that phraseology into the ethics.
Well, I think that's where it has to go.
I see. I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
And then you could bring it over there somewhere. But if you want to put it into that sentence, I think you could say, "Are you?" Well, I don't think it would fit into that because of working for a competitor. I think it would have to go down somewhere. Are you benefiting? I guess you could say, are you benefiting from a family member or friend who is working for a competitor? That would work. Are you benefiting I think you said, are you benefiting from a family member or friend who is working for a competitor, customer, or supplier somehow as a result of that work, or something like that? But I think you want your, under M, you probably should want it to read, no board member or employee shall directly through others for your use or benefit undertake, execute, hold, or enjoy in whole or in part any contract or agreement. That's where it would fit. Through others for your use or benefit.
For your use. Okay.
Or benefit. And then say undertake, execute, hold, or enjoy in whole or in part any contract or agreement made.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where it would fit. And then you would apply that over to those questions. But I just think if you're trying to make a checklist, you might just have to reword some of those. I don't know. I could work on it if you want me to, but
I think for our checklist, we just want to get. My thought was, and we can word it, however the committee, but to sort of just are you, your friends, or like I say, you can word it so just some general language to get people thinking about, what, there might be something that I need to look at a little bit more thoroughly here before I proceed. So that was sort of the reason I sort of just kind of abbreviated it, abbreviated
Yeah.
a lot of that
So
stuff.
you're not saying there's a problem there. You just want that information. You want them to think about it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And then they can approach complete our questionnaire and approach the committee, and then get into the more, well, is it exact, what exactly is the relationship, and then the committee can opine, well, is there a legal basis here? Sure, legally it might be okay if your friend's working there, if an acquaintance is there, but as Mr. Reader pointed out, practically it may be still perceived as a conflict, and so you really wouldn't want to practically do that. You could legally, but practically you might not want to do that just because of the perception.
Right. Just because it's legal, it's not always ethical. I understand that.
It could create, sure. That's but that, and that's, that's of course the reason for having the committee and everybody to help think through, because some of it doesn't, some of it's not obvious sometimes, and that's the sort of the checklist was just kind of a, sort of general issues. What can we, what some triggers that, oh, I need to start digging deeper if I see any of these items here, was sort of the thought, but I can switch it to the committee's, to the committee's pleasure. So very, very good. We got some good ideas today. What are your thoughts about anything else we should cover, cover now, or other thoughts anyone has, or what?
Well, I think, I think that list of vendors and contractors, the development of that for current and future employees, pretty important. And these changes we discussed here today. I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Number 6. Start some discussion about the use of plant board property for some.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, for some other purpose, This is just going back. I'm not saying it didn't happen, probably happened all the time. But when I was in the highway department, I get these real strict rules. If you, number one, you're not supposed to take that property and use it for anything except have to get you fired or get you in a lot of problems. The other thing is, on the questionnaire, you sure wouldn't admit it, because if you did do it, if you did take a bucket truck home with you or whatever, stop by and cut your shrubs with it or whatever you're doing,
sure.
And I was just wondering. I didn't know. I'm assuming that plant board's got equally strict rules on that kind of stuff.
Yes, sir. We don't use, you're not taking your track hoe to dig your sewer line or something, but this was sort of some questions that, somebody may not, somebody might unknowingly, there's somebody, for example, we have employees here who, as part of their, they're subject to call out. Yeah. So they'll have a truck that they take home with them, or a vehicle goes home with them. Well, somebody might see that and say, well, that employee over there is taking a truck home. I just took the truck home and, and did a little work with it. I didn't mean anything, just cut a branch off my house, something like that. But that's what leads to people calling up saying, hey, I saw somebody, and you all are not managing, you know how it all, but that was sort of, but you're exactly right. Nobody that knows is going to admit number 6, say, oh, I'm running a tree trimming business with your bucket trucks. Nobody's going to,
Yeah.
nobody's going to admit that, of course. I agree with you completely. Just sort of bring it to attention to people that, might not have been in the public sector before and, have those sorts of
I couldn't count over the years complaints received at my office about, particularly as highway commissioner, your trucks are parked over at so-and-so's grocery store and been there all day. What are they doing?
Sure.
But they really draw attention, But the truth is, there's a lot of legitimate reasons there are a lot of places.
Sure, absolutely.
And I understand the intent of it, but in reality, it's probably not. If it does happen, it's not going to show up anywhere.
That's true. But that was sort of one of the things that came off of the various ethics materials I've read through that people need to be alerted for.
Just never thought of it in that light.
Oh yes, absolutely. But we got some great ideas so far. I'm going to have a vendor's contract list. I'll revise section 4, page 4, section M there to talk about and add that in with an agreement for their benefit. Then I'll revise our questionnaire to take into account Mr. Brewer's have a signature line, and then add in question number 6 there on the evaluative form that Ms. Lemaster came. Are you involved in your employment with the decisions for the employer that you want to work with FPB? Do you deal with that any? So those are some good ideas for our kind of, I guess, a waiver process or questionnaire, and then to have kind of a pamphlet at orientation for folks to go through, kind of a checklist, just some examples and things to get people thinking about it. And then in the interview process, at the outset, when you start talking to people, in addition to the nepotism kinds of things we can ask about too. If your prior employment history has people that have worked with us before, something to dig into. So definitely some great ideas.
And as Jill pointed out, the pamphlet produced initially be distributed to everybody.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And the focus will be on after it's developed and distributed. The focus will be to put it on basically in the orientation and after new employees. Well, this would make a long motion. But,
oh my goodness.
It makes a long motion. We've all listened to it, and I'm sure you've got folks who can put that in, for the record, put that in some succinct, statement. But I think we should receive a motion from the floor to approve this or modify it or whatever. So I would ask somebody to motion to approve these various tasks that Hans is going to put in motion for our later approval.
I move that we approve all that's before us.
Motion made. Here a second.
Second.
Motion made and second. Motion passes. And
all in.
Oh, you're all in favor. Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Aye. It's unanimous. And I think what we'll have to do is, once this is produced, to make this thing proper, we're going to have some kind of a meeting to approve it.
Yes, sir. Okay. Very good. Very good. Good idea. Well, what I'll do is I'll get started on our items. It shouldn't be, and then I'll do an informational item for the board on next board meeting to kind of report on what we've done today. And then we can, and then I'll, if anybody thinks of any other sort of checklist items to, if it's okay, I think our memo, if it's okay with everybody, I'll send our memo on to sort of the board members and see what their thoughts are at this point on the conflicts and so forth, and see if they have anything they would like to add to to that. And then if they come back with anything, well, we could take that up at the next meeting and
Right.
and have that before everybody. So
That's fine.
how's
because
that?
We're in an advisory position to them anyway. So
Mhm.
Pretty
we're
good.
pretty good of them.
Sure.
You're
Yes,
right,
sir.
That's a good idea.
Yes, sir. That sounds great. Is anybody any other I'll take all the help I can get, definitely. So if anybody has other thoughts, I'd be more than happy to get them going.
Any other new business to come before the group? By anybody, any comments or whatever? Well, I think I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I hear one.
So move.
Motion made. Second,
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Motion made, seconded, and approved, and so thank you for your time today.
Yes, sir. Mick,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thanks everybody for
Thank
their
you.
insight.
Bye.
Bye-bye.